There we go. Wallace Gusler, I was delighted to find out, is not only a native of Virginia, but he grew up in Salem. So he was very willing to come and speak to us, which I greatly appreciate. That he got his start in Salem. An early interest in history sparked his study of the Virginia Indians and the 18th century frontier. These interests led him to make a percussion pistol at the age of 14. In his small shop, Gusler had a business making and repairing flintlock rifles for 7 years. Then in 1962, he established the gunsmith shop at Colonial Williamsburg, where he became the first person in modern times to recreate all the traditional processes of making long rifles by hand. He pioneered research on Virginia-made long rifles and taught and supervised a team of skilled artisans who researched and made 18th century style firearms and interpreted the historic trade. Gusler spent more than a decade in the curatorial department of Colonial Williamsburg, first as curator of mechanical objects, then as curator of furniture and arms. As curator, he directed the reinterpretation and the refurnishing of the Governor's Palace, a 7-year project completed in 1981. He also helped design the opening exhibits at the DeWitt Wallace Decorative Arts Museum. Gusler is an active contributor to scholarly publications and now runs a consulting business, Wallace Gusler Arts. He lectures and teaches on firearms, furniture, carving, historic technologies, the Virginia frontier, and ethnographic and Native American objects. He continues to make custom long rifles and frontier tomahawks and is a dealer in all the areas of his research specialties. Wonderful presentation. Wallace, thank you so much for being with us, and I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm trying to get this thing to move.
Well, I don't have lights.
We have a technical issue.
We also thank Liza Gusler for being tech support today. She's been doing an amazing
Well,
job.
I'm not very good tech support right now. It was moving fine a minute ago, and now it's not.
You want me to move?
I'm sharing. Okay, now we're where we want to be. Okay.
Are we still connected?
We're connected. You're looking good.
Okay, thank you. There are guns in this lecture that are in the exhibit at William King. I didn't have enough of those because it's a lone exhibit. I couldn't get put together a total talk on that exhibit. But this is one slice of the middle of the Shenandoah Valley, and it moves back and forth a bit. I'm starting with this, when I did this lecture for the 251st anniversary of Botetourt County. That's my dad on McAfee's Knob in 1927. It's a prominent landmark in the area, and it was named for the McAfee brothers who lived below there.
Hasn't started yet.
Excuse me? Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, keep going.
Okay. Anyway, the McAfee brothers were in that movement going into Kentucky, the famous Long Hunters, and they had lived in Botetourt County through the 60s and early 70s. The reason the long rifle developed and was not superseded by European imports is it was designed, it started as the German short rifle, but it was designed to fulfill deer hunting, and deerskin trade was probably the reason that it succeeded. The deerskin trade was what fueled a lot of the frontier, and in the 1750s and 60s and 70s, Virginia was exporting 40 or 35 or 40,000 pounds of deer skin to Europe. And so the hunting with the long rifle being so accurate, you didn't have to carry as much lead and powder for the long distances. And so the deer skin was what was really fueling it. Of course, they were using deer for food on the frontier as well. In the Valley of Virginia and most of the American backcountry, there were two types of guns, rifles and smoothbores. The smoothbores are what we today call a shotgun. A lot of times today, the term rifle is used as a generic term for a long gun. But in the 18th century, it was the other way around. The generic term in the backcountry of Virginia was just gun. And when it was a rifle, it was called a rifle gun in most of the documents and in language. So the rifle is distinguished by having a spiral bore. The grooves cut in it that's caused the bullet to spin when it comes out. And that's what gives its accuracy. If you want to parallel it to spinning a football, when you throw it, it goes accurately and straight. And it was something developed in Germany in the latter part of the 15th century. So rifles have been around a long time. Through the 18th century, or most of the 18th century, military preferred smoothbore muskets. The term musket denotes a military smoothbore gun. And because of its speed to load, the rifle took longer to load. So the accurate rifle was being made from beginning in the area of Lancaster, Pennsylvania, north up in the Susquehannock area, and south through Maryland into the Shenandoah Valley. This is a Stoner's book on Botetourt County, which is a very good reference if you want a very thorough study of this part of Virginia. And it's showing the Botetourt County. Most people don't realize that Kentucky was a county in Virginia set up in 1778, and it was still Virginia until 1792 when it got statehood. But you can see the line marking out Botetourt, the Tennessee, North Carolina line, and then that angle going up to Illinois and so forth. It was a massive territory. 1770. Here's some fascinating signatures from Botetourt rifles. The top one, John Wilson, Craig's Creek, BC for Botetourt County. And these finials sort of unite these two signatures. John Seitz worked in Fincastle, and Wilson worked in the headwaters of the James. And the Simpson family was also in the headwaters of the James. This is Thomas Simpson. And you'll notice that these two signatures are signed Fecit, which is Latin for maker. And there's only 3 Kentucky rifles that I've ever heard of that have that Latin signature. And another one is Jacob Curator. We'll be looking at one of his guns later. And they all have connections with Fincastle. It's not unusual in artist signatures, but these with the silver plates inlaid into the top of the barrel, that's very unusual to use Latin on that. The earliest rifle, one of the earliest rifles from America is this one, which is got a signature on the side plate, probably owner, Johannes Farber, in kind of dialect German script. Headwaters of the James, Simpson Creek runs up that way. And this may be an early Simpson rifle. It's survived intact with the original flintlock. It's very Dutch German in style. It has an imported British lock. They were buying those locks at stores. And in the most remote parts of the frontier, the wagoners kept those stores all connected. The heartbeat of the backcountry was the wagons. They were going back and forth, moving products. The stock there has a wooden patch box that slides out, a compartment. And these pictures are from Giles Cromwell's book. He owns this piece now and lives near Richmond, Virginia. Notice that these mounts are engraved. Now, these guys had to cast their trigger guards in sand castings. And this one has the Johannes Farber in script on the side plate, and with a kind of an acanthus extension right at the top photograph. I don't know if you can see that signature or not. It has a beautiful shell carved around the breech tang on the bottom photograph, and that heart-shaped escutcheon. That they often call that in the backcountry a thumb piece. Frequently, the owner's initials were engraved on that thumb piece. Engraving on the butt piece tang. Thomas Simpson Feckett again. This rifle was made in East Tennessee, and this is a 1974. Not a very great picture, but I put it in because it was the first time I saw this rifle. It is signed G. Mansker on a silver plate on the door of the patch box. That was a compartment for carrying cloth patches that you used in loading. And this one right in front of right at the bottom of the door, you'll see a round button. You press that and the door springs open to make easy access. You might notice that many of these rifles have double triggers. That's a real fine mechanism. The back trigger is pulled and that sets it. And then the front trigger is used to fire the gun. It enables the trigger pull to be adjusted with the lightest touch. So when your sights are lined up, you can immediately set the gun off. It's for fine shooting. The reverse of the Simpson rifle, and this rifle belongs to that headwaters of the James group. And we're having trouble tracking Thomas Simpson, but and here's a color picture of it, much more. You can see the beautiful quality of the engraving, the silver wire inlay at the top in front of the butt plate, and the very fine curly maple, and the G. Mansker. Gaspar Mansker was the long hunter, sort of the Daniel Boone of Tennessee. And this rifle was made very near Mansker Station. It's dated 1791, relief carved. And in the silver oval inlaid in the side plate, the brass side plate, the 1791 is engraved. Tarnish has made that difficult to read. The cheek piece, often they have an 8-pointed star here. The diamond occurs repeatedly in many of these Balatot guns. And I think it was a symbol of resolute and so forth, and was an important, it may have been a militia flag of these units. I don't know, but it's unusual to have this diamond repeated over and over on the cheek piece. This is where you rest your cheek when you take aim and fire. The top of that piece, a pair of pistols from that region. These are attributed, they're not signed, but it's the workmanship in the side plate and a couple other features that help us identify sometimes a specific hand, sometimes a specific group. In this case, it's a specific group of pieces. The acorn finial on the trigger guard occurs in British pistols, became very popular in the back country because so many English fowlers were coming into the back country and being used. They were much cheaper than a long rifle. Now we're moving, this school moved west into Kentucky, and this is William Whitley's house. If you notice above the door in glazed headers are his initials. He was from Rockbridge County and moved out to the frontier of Kentucky and built one of the first brick houses in Kentucky, and it still stands today and is open to the public. He wasn't exactly modest, was he? This is his rifle. He was killed at the Battle of Thames, and it's thought that he and Tecumseh killed each other in that battle. In Canada in 1813, he was in his middle 60s when he went off to that campaign. And you see it's got silver inlay, carving, and very, very similar side plate to the to the Farber rifle and the Simpson. But in this case, Jacob Young signed it in an oval engraved on that side plate. The two screws up there when the lock was changed, and the brass band around the wrist is an old repair. These guns often got broken right through the wrist, just back of the trigger. You can see that nailed on repair. The relief carving. Patch box finely engraved. There you can see, perhaps you can see the Jacob Young. And so that screw was moved forward because a later lock had been put into the gun. And that happened a lot. These pieces were handed down through families, and this one definitely was handed through the family. A large powder horn, a fabulous piece of work. These were returned by the militia to the family when he was killed up in Canada. And this is his powder horn, one of my favorite powder horns of all time. See the large or integral cameo. They achieve that by cutting down the horn real thin. They want the horn thin so you can see the powder in it. And then they left this thicker part with the white out part of the powder horn. William Whitley, I am your horn, the truth I love and a lie I scorn. Fill me with the best of powder to make your rifle crack the louder. See how the dread, terrific ball makes Indians bleed and Tories fall. With you, your powder I'll supply for to defend your liberty. That's just a great powder horn and a great inscription. You notice it says make the rifle crack the louder. That's one of the earliest references to that. When the rifle is loaded properly, it will crack because it's breaking the sound barrier as the bullet departs the barrel. We looked at this signature earlier, John Wilson, Craig's Creek, Botetourt County. Here's a fine rifle made by him with a relationship to this Thomas Simpson patch box. A nice bird on the finial and nicely engraved. This is how I document rifles, making lots of measurements, putting together an archive of details about each rifle. And this one I owned at the time, so I didn't fill out the owner and so forth at the top. But it also gives me my release for publication. And so when the owner signed that, I got all the detail plus the release for publishing. This is the fore-end of that rifle, showing the sort of acorn finials on the, those are called draw loops. And that's a sort of a rectangular bolt that goes through those silver inlays and enters a loop on the bottom of the barrel and holds the rifle and the stock together. Here's John Wilson, gunsmith, born in Virginia. He moved to the Cumberland in Tennessee. And how I know when he moved is right here on this page of the 1850 federal census. You can see his wife, Elizabeth, born in Virginia, and his children on down to the very bottom, and a 2-year-old female. So in 1850, he was in Tennessee, and he came in 1848 because of the births of his children. Many people migrated. This is I don't expect you to read all this, but a very good inventory of a gunsmith's inventory, a gunsmith, George Wilson. He's third generation back from John, who we've been looking at. And so he died in 1799, you can see there, and was working in the 1760s. Another rifle by John Wilson. And I put this one in because it's an iron mounted rifle. Iron mounted rifles were made parallel to brass mounted ones. But this one has a checkered wrist right where you put your hand around it. And it's all the little X's formed by the checkering has silver nails driven in there, and each one of them must have taken him weeks to put all those in. That was a rifle I wanted for the exhibit, but it wasn't available. Another headwaters of the James, I mentioned the diamonds. This patch box shows a lot of diamonds, and it's in, it is iron mounted. It has fabulous carving behind the cheek piece and a curly maple stock. Details of the back sight, or the hind sight, they called it, on the left, and the small bead on the front. And you see the engraving around the muzzle up there. That's a detail that connects many rifles one to another made in the headwaters of the James. You'll notice that that sight, they call that a buckhorn type because on each side, the finials sort of rise up above the sighting plane. So that little notch in that was lined up with that silver bead, and the base of that silver sight is brass dovetailed into the barrel. This one attributed to Philip Haymaker. The Haymaker family was in Winchester. Adam was the first rifle maker there. He bought his lot in 1753. And I don't have it in this, but there is a Adam Haymaker rifle that was made in the 1770s, starting our information about that school. In 1797, when Adam was selling his lot from 1753, Philip Haymaker was living in Fincastle, and this is probably either by him or somebody that influenced him, was influenced by him, excuse me. Adam Haymaker signed his early rifle with an AH in engraved script calligraphy. Jacob Curator was married in Botetourt in 1786. In 18, he lot in Fincastle. An interesting factor on this one is the man in the moon. For many years, I wondered why they had crescent moons on Kentucky rifles. That, you know, it's such a symbol of Eastern, and these are definitely not made in Turkey. So that is an Indian, an engraving of an Indian inside the man in the moon. And the half moon was a battle formation that was used by both sides, the Indians and the whites. So in tree-to-tree combat in the wilderness, if you were a superior party to the party you're fighting, you tried to form a half moon on them so you could get angles to shoot at each other from behind trees. So that's why these occur. I think this is the first time I've put that out in the public. I'm showing the bottom of this one because the toe plate, those little rectangle pieces in a row, let's see, the third one over from the left from that screw, the third one is actually a pressure plate that you push and it springs the patch box open. So it's a concealed latch. That latch is identical to one by the Grandstaff family up in the Shenandoah County. They use that as well. And I don't know the connection between the two. The Grandstaff rifle is in the exhibition, and so are the pistols that we saw earlier. George Peterman Botetourt. This is the finest rifle I've seen by him. I think sometimes the black and white shows the engraving better. We used to call this bird, you know, we thought it was a duck or something. And then there's that fable about the Pennsylvania distal fink that was always looking where it's been. I don't think that holds much much favor. I think it's kind of an old folklore, but we found two of these rifles with this bird on it, and one was holding fish in its claws and the other another bird. So to them, it's a bird of prey. Beautiful carvings accented by silver inlays and the really elaborate star on the cheek piece. Another George Peterman. I don't have color photographs, but this example has a very fine patch box of a different pattern. But that one with the flower at the top that's kind of spiraling is the most classic, typical Shenandoah Valley. And it started in Winchester with the Haymaker family. And this one is slightly modified, but derived from that Haymaker family. George Peterman in the 1850 census was listed as born in Pennsylvania. The workmanship on his earliest rifles suggests he may have learned his trade around York, Pennsylvania. Other views of Peterman rifles. This one, the side plate is all silver, and the star on the cheek piece is silver. And again, it's fine curly maple. Many of these have stump cut so that the grain of the wood runs around the curve of the buttstock. So that makes it much stronger. Back up. Here's a close-up of that fine patch box. He was one of the best engravers in the Valley of Virginia. Now, each one of these, they're called thimbles that hold the ramrod. You have to have the wooden ramrod to load. And it's very unusual to have this double, and each one out, there's three of them that are all double. So it basically looks like six thimbles, but they're made in one unit of two each. And the silver inlays on this survive. By the way, this rifle was stocked around a signed John Sight's rifle, one of his competitors. Probably the customer brought it to him to have the rifle built. Often the customer provided the silver. This is another Peterman rifle. There are 4 Peterman rifles in the show in Abington. And this one is one with a signature. Probably about 1840. Fabulous workmanship and all these details. And this is another Peterman rifle that is spectacularly inlaid. And notice that behind that cheek piece next to the butt plate and in front, he used designs in silver, the way he designed his carving in relief. And a really great eagle. You can count those stars, but in looking at many of these and powder horns, I've often found that the number of stars are not necessarily related to the number of states. And that seems to be true in a lot of federal period powder horns, which have engraved eagles on them. I wanted to close this by saying that in the Valley of Virginia, over the years, with the help of graduate students and others, and some of my own work, we surveyed 9 counties down the valley and down the east escarpment of the Blue Ridge for all the guns and knives and tomahawks and rifle guns in the wills and inventories. In Augusta County, for instance, that was 44 will books. It seemed like we would never get through with that county, but wonderful stuff. Anyway, the average in each county was about 1/3 rifles and 2/3 smoothbores. So it wasn't a country of all rifle guns. The smoothbores were important, and in many households that had a rifle gun, they also had a smoothbore, like many farmers today have a rifle for shooting large game and a smoothbore for hunting small game with birdshot. And one thing that's very important with the long rifle throughout its history, it was an important shooting match arm, and it was a major men's sport, was having shooting matches with rifles. And most of the time, when we find documents of those shooting matches, they are held by store owners, and they have the prizes for the shooting match, and they also have the rum, and they sell chances for shooting, and they sell rum. So you can imagine what a party that might have been. Thank you very much for your attention.